citizen. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome.
Oh, you know we got
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast. I want to start today with a personal note. One of our previous guests, David Hartsoe, is an old friend of mine from high school days. He's one of the people who first got me involved in the whole peace movement. I was already working for peace, but he inspired me so much because he came to the Friends meeting in Washington where we were, and he's part of doing this San Francisco to Moscow peace march in the height of the Cold War. And right now, David is in the hospital with a life-threatening illness. Now, being in life-threatening situations is nothing new to David. I mean, he's faced down armed trains coming through, one that badly injured his friend to try to stop weapons shipments. He's went, as I said, went to Moscow in the height of the Cold War, gone to all kinds of dangerous situations. But right now, our prayers and thoughts are really with him because he's in the hospital. Our thoughts go out to him. He was the co-founder of many important organizations like World Beyond War, one of the most crucial organizations, going to the fundamental thing. No, we don't have to tinker with, focus on just, do we stop doing war this way? And do we do it without war, child soldiers, but then kill big people? Or do we blow people up instead of poison gassing them? I mean, we don't have to make those choices. We can abolish all war. And this organization shows how eminently, really simple, clear, and straightforward it is to simply move to a world beyond war. Such an important organization. Another very important organization having a big impact in the world today, and you don't hear about it very often, but it's the Nonviolent Peace Force. And all over the world, they have teams that are actually working to stop wars, battles, violence. And today's guest is a very special woman, Asha Ashokan. And Asha, she was working with the Nonviolent Peace Force in South Sudan. I have a little article about her work there. I just want to mention this. Here she was. There was this battle between these Dinka men who tower 6'5", these huge giants, and in comparison to them, this much smaller but powerful woman from Kerala, India, came to them with Abraham, and the battle was already on. People were already wounded and bleeding. And so it says, what happened is the Nonviolent Peace Force immediately intervened with Asha and Abraham in the lead. When the team arrived, youth were already wounded. Working quickly, Asha and Abraham shuttled back and forth between the contending clans to de-escalate the conflict and prevent any further violence that day. They actually stopped a battle that was breaking out. Now the youth asked Abraham, who is this short woman and where does she come from? Well, let me start with that question. Asha, who is this woman and where does she come from?
Thank you, Arthur, for inviting me, and it's a great opportunity. Yeah, that's an interesting story or an act that I was able to do when I worked with Nonviolent Peace Force in South Sudan. So I started my career as a lawyer, maritime lawyer, or a shipping lawyer in India. But then later I realized that I need to do something very different. And I pursued my first master's in international human rights and humanitarian law in India. That's the time a friend of mine shared a picture with me. I don't know whether you have heard about it. It was a famous picture taken by Kevin Carter, and the name of the picture is The Struggling Girl. So the picture was a child in South Sudan was trying to go to a UN food camp, and near to this child, there was a vulture waiting for the child to die so that the vulture could eat that child. This picture, I think, stormed the entire world, and it also shocked me as well, because that was the first time I was able to understand the horrific impact of violence and war on civilians, especially children. That kind of, inspired me, or, put a seed in my mind to think about working on peace building and conflict resolution.
Now, many people see a picture like that and they get moved as you did, but not all of them actually spring into action. What was your next step after you saw that picture?
Actually, I was, being a woman from the southern part of India, I mean, there were like a lot of societal barriers where I could not even think about going out of my state. So I think I was like, okay, this is my desire, but I don't know how to go. I mean, how to pursue this desire. So for
And that
almost
was the desire to go to Sudan, where the child was, to try to remedy the situation, right?
Exactly. So I went back to my I went back to work as a lawyer for another 2 years because I didn't have like enough money, and I didn't have the courage to, go to Sudan because it was a very new country for me. But in 2010, before that, like my father always, he's the biggest inspiration in my life. So he is a very progressive and forward thinking person, and he always used to tell me, if you want to make a change in the life of people, or if you wanted to do something, take action instead of just saying to people. So if you want to make a change, take actions. I think that's right. And in 2010, I relocated myself from India to Sudan with the help of friends and family, of course. And I went there without a job. I went there, I don't know what made me from where did I got the courage to go there? But I went there without a job. But after within a 1 month or something, I got a job as an international contractor with the UN mission. It was not something related to human rights. It was not something related to conflict resolution or peace building. It was just in a food and supply department. But
it was working with the United Nations, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
At least you were a step toward working on something positive.
Exactly. It gave me a lot of opportunities to interact with a lot of people working on human rights and humanitarian issues, both with the UN and with NGOs. In South Kordofan, that is a border of Sudan and South Sudan. That's where I used to work. And I continued my work there until 2011, when the conflict or armed violence broke out between Sudan Armed Forces and SPLA, which was considered as a rebel group at that time by the government of Sudan. But now they are the National Force of South Sudan. So at that time in 2011, they were considered as a rebel group. So there was a war between Sudan Armed Forces and SPLM, which ended up in killing of people, injuring of people, and displacement of many, including women and children. And I saw it in front of me because the place where I was living was surrounded by mountains, and you could see in the morning the armed forces from Sudan using the MiG fighter and Antonov war fighter flights, roaming around and dropping bombs and shooting and all. So you could see that in front of you. So that was the first time I saw severe impact, the horrific impact of war and violence.
So you had bombs right within your view, and your house was being shaken, or what? What was it like to be experiencing this war situation?
The first day I couldn't understand anything because that was the first time I saw this kind of, I mean, a week ago I watched Hotel Rwanda. I don't know whether you have watched that movie.
Yes.
It also shows the horrific impact of war in Rwanda. So initially I couldn't understand what exactly was going on, but then later, my friends told me that this is a kind of like armed conflict going on, and the impact was so high, like the plates in my table just fell down and broke into small pieces. So it was such a horrific impact. I think, I couldn't do much except helping the UN in distributing food and water in the IDP camp, which was near to the UN camp. So we were there for almost 20 days. And after 20 days, we were evacuated. The UN evacuated all the staffs from South Kordofan to Khartoum by road. It was like 10 hours journey. It felt very bad because we were leaving the people behind who were already suffering without any help. On another way, it was like horrific for me because traveling from, because every 10 miles there will be a checkpoint and the military will come and check in the bus. And there was only 3 or 4 women in the bus, and it was like really very scary for me because that was my first experience. So we went to Khartoum, and from there, President al-Bashir ordered every international organization and the UN staff to get out of the country because he wanted the UN mission to be closed or closed down, the Sudan mission. So that's how the Sudan mission got closed, and I went back to India thinking that like that's the end of my humanitarian work. But I think destiny was with me. In 2012 beginning, I got an offer letter from another organization in South Sudan. I do not want to name the organization because I didn't work for them for more. I worked for them only for 1 week because my principles and their, the principles were not aligned. I could see there were like some frauds and all, financial frauds and all. So I didn't continue working for them. I quitted the job. But I was not ready to go back. Even though I had a return flight ticket, I was not ready to go back. I didn't have a job. I didn't have health insurance, but I was very adamant that I was going to stay there and find a job in conflict prevention or peace building and human rights. So it was very, now looking back, it's like, it's very, I feel like, oh my God, did I do all these things? So I stayed in a hostel, which is called an Asian hostel. That was only Asian hostel in South Sudan. So that's a place where all the, the people who comes to work for short term, who doesn't have like a permanent place, used to stay there. So it was only $15 a day. You get 3 meals and you get a safe place to stay. So it was very interesting for me. So I stayed there, and in the meantime, I was applying for a lot of jobs, and that's how I saw the job notification from Nonviolent Peace Force, and I applied. I didn't know about the organization initially. My only intention was to work on peace building and conflict resolution or human rights. So I applied. Then I got an email from Tiffany Estom, who was a then country director and now executive director of Nonviolent Peace Force. So she told me, yeah, I understand that you are in South Sudan. Would you like to have an interview? And I said, of course, I'm ready for an interview. And I met her. We had a semi-formal interview where we talked about the work of Nonviolent Peace Force and my passion and all. And then she was like, okay, are you interested to work as an international protection officer for Nonviolent Peace Force? But it will be in remote location and it will be risky. You'll be working and living within the community. If you're ready, I will be super happy to give you this job. And I was like, yes, this is what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And I got that job as an international protection officer with Nonviolent Peace Force. And my first deployment was to a very remote location called Ural West County in Lake State in South Sudan. It was very remote. We had to travel almost 10 hours to reach there. The time when I reached there, my head was and my 2 other international colleagues, our head were completely filled with mud because, the rods were not tarmac rods. It was muddy road. So it was very interesting. And one important thing that I noticed about Nonviolent Peace Force as soon as I arrived was there were a few community members who were already ready to, waiting for, to welcome us. So I started asking, we are very new. How did it, how do they know us? And then they came to know Nonviolent Peace Force had a project in another location, and the way they supported the community was appreciated and accepted by the community. And this community, the new community where I was deployed, came to know about that one, and that's how they accepted Nonviolent Peace Force, and they, invited Nonviolent Peace Force to work there.
You work with the people, not just coming in from the outside, we're going to do good for you. You're helping empower them and what they want to do, right?
Exactly. So that's the main thing, like NP work. I call it NP, sorry. I call it as a Nonviolent Peace Force. The short form is NP. So Nonviolent Peace Force work within the community. And the three main principles are nonviolence. We are a nonviolent. We believe in non-partisanship. We are a non-partisan partisan organization. And the third is primacy of local actors. So it's not like any organization go and tell the community how to do things, but you're supporting the community in their problems. You're not dictating anything to them. So they know, because most of the time we don't understand that they have the solution. We just need to give them the support. That's it.
Exactly.
So this story, what you're talking about, like after we arrived there, we started building relationship with different stakeholders. We met police, we met traditional chiefs. The traditional chiefs are the head of the community in that place. So we met traditional chiefs, we met police, we met military, we met governors, and all the other community members who are influential and not influential. So we met them and built that relationship and shared our a vision of supporting the community. And I think after 1 week or something, my national colleague, Abraham, the person who was in that blog, he received a call from the community saying that there is a armed violence happening. There's a violence happening between two communities, and they need, we need to intervene. So immediately we contacted the police and asked them, like, hey, did you hear about this one? And they said, we did, and I asked, like, did you manage to go there? And they said, like, no, we don't have a vehicle to go, so we're still waiting. So I said to them, listen, we are going there. It will be great if you can come there. And because police is, of course, a part of the community, and they also need to do their responsibility. Mm-hmm. So as a Nonviolent Peace Force, a team of 3 people went to the scene, or the place where the violence was happening. It was very horrifying for me. What we did was, we provided protective presence to make sure that they're no more fighting with each other. We engaged with traditional leaders. We also engaged with community members and got a promise that they will not fight until there is a meeting between the community leaders to decide on, to agree on or not to agree on. After several, back and forth engagement, multi-level diplomacy, we call it as multi-level diplomacy. So we included the governor, we included military, police, and everybody. So after a lot of, engagement and multi-level diplomacy, we got a promise that they were ready to have a meeting with each other. So the next day.
So that's so interesting, by the way. Normally the UN or people think they have to go in with military force to stop violence. And you just went in as just, your own personality and yourself. And just by your presence, somehow you were able to stop a battle maybe easier than somebody might have done if they had gone in there with guns and arms and tried to fight them, right?
Exactly. And that is what, like, many people, even the people whom the South Sudan people doesn't know that nonviolence is much better than, like using arms. They only know that, like the retaliation should be done through violent methods. So this is a very new technique for them. So they were like, okay, can we solve a problem through nonviolent tactics? So they were not aware about it. So after, like, of course, I went there without arms or without the support of any people with arms. But I had the confidence because, that's all based on the trust you have with the community, few of the community members with whom you already created that trust.
So here you are with these towering 6'5" men, and you're breaking up the violence, not through power, but through trust and through the inspiration of your presence. And you're just almost like your nonviolent spirit is more powerful than they're splitting heads open, people are bleeding, and it all stops as you step into the situation. That's really heartening.
Yeah, and the first big thing, I mean, it was not only about, like having a dialogue, the peaceful dialogue. It was also about making sure that the people are safe. So the first big thing we did was, we made sure that the people who were injured got the medical facility, because they were afraid to go to the hospital. They thought that the other group will do the retaliation against them if they are admitted in the hospital. So we made sure that there is a protective presence in the hospital, so that they are not attacked when the the peace dialogue is happening and all. When the peace dialogue is, when we are preparing for the peace dialogue, they are not attacked in the hospital as well. So there was protective presence provided at the hospital, protective presence provided at the community, the two different communities. So we managed to get more people from the office for that one. And the next day morning, after the engagement with different actors, we created a safe space for the conflicting communities to come together and talk their problems and resolve the issues through nonviolent tactics. And it was not easy. It took a couple of days to arrive at a peaceful agreement. However, it did. And they finally agreed that they will not fight with each other. And this particular incident was very close to me. I mean, we, as an international protection officer for nonviolent peace force, I have, along with my colleagues, I have intervened in many, I've supported the community in conflict resolution. But this is so important and very close to my heart, because almost the next year, almost the same time frame, I got a call from an unknown number, and the person who was talking he was talking in Arabic, and I didn't understand. So I said like "Mafi," which means sorry, and then the call got disconnected. And the next, within few minutes, I got another call, and the person told me, "I'm calling on behalf of the community leader, or the traditional chief. And he would like to thank Nonviolent Peace Force and me because they never fight with each other after that incident, because they didn't want to get shamed in front of, because people from other countries are coming to our community to solve our problems, and it is very shameful. We don't want other people to talk about our problems." So it was really interesting for me.
You brought out the best in them. So wow, good for you. You started because you saw the picture of this child. Did you ever reconnect with where that picture was taken?
Yes, I did. So to continue about that one, I think I worked for Nonviolent Peace Force in South Sudan for almost 3 years. After 6 months, I was moved to the headquarters, where I was working on, working with the national level government and all. And also for building the capacity of community members in establishing their own community-based protection mechanisms. That was until 2014, and I took a break and went back to India for some time for my family needs and all. And in 2016, I got a job with a United Nations mission in South Sudan as a child protection officer. And my role was kind of, monitoring and reporting of grave violation against children in the context of armed conflict by armed forces and armed groups. So in South Sudan, there were several grave violations were done against children by armed forces and groups, which includes killing. During the war, children were killed, they were injured, they were sexually abused, recruited in the army. So there were several violations were done against them. And in addition to this reporting of six grave violation to the UN, I mean, it goes to the Secretary General, and then it is discussed in the Security Council, and they name and shame the nations or the countries that have been violating the rights of children. So that is one part of my role. And the second was kind of engaging or advocating with the armed forces and groups for the release and reintegration of child soldiers. It was not easy because, when you go and see these children, we asked them, like, if we, of course, advocate with the armed forces and groups. And it is after a long engagement, they agreed to release these children. And for the release, event, we go to the field for releasing these children. It's an event. So when you ask the children, why you want to go and work as a child soldier, and it's very heartbreaking. They say that because I don't have food to eat, and I want, if I'm with the military, I will get some food to eat. And that's one story. And the other is, like, most of the time they are forced by the armed forces and groups to fight against their own people. They use these children to fight against their own people. So in 2016, just before I left South Sudan to US, I got the opportunity to attend this event of releasing 350 children in a place called Jonglei. And I realized that is a place where this, the vulture and the child picture was shot. So it was very, very, touching for me again. So, but we managed to, as a UN, along with the other partners, we managed to release almost 700 child soldiers, and they were reintegrated back into their community.
How do you reintegrate children who've been, I watched a very powerful movie where these children are indoctrinated by watching Rambo movies and other violent movies, and they're told this is the great thing to do, to heroically go back and even go into your own community and kill your own family and people back there because they've been so brainwashed and told that this is the thing to do. How do kids who've gone through that terrible violence get reintegrated back into the community as functioning citizens?
Exactly. That's a very, very long process. And I, as a child protection officer, I still believe that the reintegration, I still think that, like the UN and all the partners need to rethink about whether it is a sustainable reintegration or not. The reason why I'm telling you we need to think about sustainable reintegration because in 2013, that was the first time the South Sudan had its civil war after independence. At that time, before 2013, everybody was working so hard to build the nation or build the country back into a peaceful country. And then suddenly the 2013 crisis happened and everything just boom, everything went back to the same. The children who were released and reintegrated were again re-recruited by the armed forces and groups because they wanted to fight again. So again, we worked together to release these children from the barracks, and reintegration started happening. And then the 2016 fighting happened, or the war happened between the rebel groups and the government. Again, the children were re-recruited. So it's happening as a cycle. To your question about how can we do sustainable reintegration, how do we integrate children? The first thing is that unless and until the country is not peaceful, unless and until the country is completely peaceful, this cycle will continue. But the way that we do there is most of the community are not ready to accept the children back into their community because they think that these children has done horrific crimes and they have killed their own people. So most of the time family is not ready to accept it. So we have to work with the family to, give psychosocial support to both the family and the children. And we have to it's also called family tracing and reunification. So when the children associated with armed forces are identified, we make sure to trace the family of that child, then engage with the family, psychosocial support is given to the child. And there is also a small economic package is given to the child and the family so that the child is able to go back to the family. And in some cases, the child is also, most of the cases, the UNICEF is doing this one. Most of the times, these children are sent to schools or to vocational training centers so that they can be reintegrated slowly back into the community.
Sounds like such important work. One of the things that's so powerful about your story is that you reached out across the world to Sudan. You had that amazing experience. Now I understand that from there you've now gone back to not back to India, but come to Minneapolis. What brought you here?
So after my UN mission or assignment, while I was doing my assignment with the UN, I got a Rotary Peace Fellowship. It's a very competitive peace fellowship. Around like 50 people are selected to study on master's degree. So I was selected to study on policy at Duke University. And I came here, and that was really a very good opportunity for me to learn more about the work everybody else is doing. And I just, in June, in May 2020, I graduated. And after that, I got an opportunity with Nonviolent Peace Force in Minneapolis. Because after the George Floyd death, there has been a lot of violence that is happening in this community in Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. There has been, safety and civilians' safety and security were threatened. One of the reasons was there has been, after the George Floyd death, and also because of the other racial injustice happening in the US, there is a lot of mistrust between the community and the police. For example, the community was not ready to call the police whenever there is a safety and security issues. So that, I think, made Nonviolent Peace Force, Mel Duncan, who is the co-founder of Nonviolent Peace Force, to think about, like, implementing or utilizing those unarmed civilian protection methodologies in this community. Because initially everybody thinks that, like UCP or unarmed civilian protection methodologies will not work in a country like US. It only works in South Sudan. But the reality is nonviolent tactics works everywhere in the world. And that's the only thing that will work everywhere in the world. Because if you are using violence, there will be more violence. And I was reading a lot of, reports and all. In the US, there are 400 million guns for, if I'm not wrong, for 300 million people or 350 million people. That is only creating more, trust issue between people. People fear about each other. So I think it is also like, that was also one reason. Of course, polarization is another reason, which is affecting the safety and security of people, civilians in the country. And another thing was, it was also during the election time. So there was a lot of, voter intimidation. People fear about going to vote because they feared voter intimidation. So I came here for that project, for designing, and I was supporting the organization for designing the project, also for providing protection to the civilians through unarmed civilian protection methodology.
Did you find that during the election, you did need to protect some people who were trying to vote from violence?
Yes, we did, we call it as context analysis and actors mapping and all, need assessment and all. And based on those needs, it was analyzed that there is a huge need for protecting the rights of people during the election time. So what we did was we trained volunteers from the community on unarmed civilian protection methodologies. And on the election day, we, several of these volunteers were sent to the polling stations. So they were in the polling station, making sure that the civilians are able to exercise their right to vote without any intimidation. In addition to that, we also had like a command center where we used to, whenever there is a serious threat or a serious intimidation, we get information from the polling station saying, hey, there is voter intimidation and we need somebody who is much more experienced in de-escalation and civilian protection. So we also had a mobile response team who used to go to this polling station as soon as we get this information and make sure that there is the problem is de-escalated through UCP methodologies, and the civilians are protected and their right to vote is exercised. They're
So
able to exercise their right to vote.
the police are calling you. The police are calling the nonviolent,
Not the police,
not
not
the
the
police,
police. It is the community.
the
Uh,
community.
the
The
community
community
was
people
yes, the
calling
community.
you because intimidation was going on. And can you give us one of the examples or stories of where there was intimidation and how you were able to stop it?
Yes, exactly. So we were in many instances, some of them were very small ones, some of them were like, kind of, people really intimidating, asking, why are you here? What are you doing? You don't have any right to do, you don't have a right to vote and all those things. In those kinds, we use several techniques like Clara. It's all technologies, like, terminologies. So we use this de-escalation techniques to make sure that the violence is or the threat is de-escalated. So that is how we used to do. We did in during the election day, but after that also, like, there were a lot of people. I mean, the community have been some of the communities have been protesting in, for example, the Black Lives Matters. They have been protesting in Minneapolis, and there's always a fear that other groups will intervene and there could be a chance of violence. So in those protests and in those protests as well, we provided protective presence. We made sure that we as unarmed civilian protectors without arms are giving protection to these people who are doing the protest and demonstrations. So it's a well proven technique that the power of nonviolence is much, much higher than going with arms.
So you need to be training police in nonviolent techniques. They can learn something from you. Well, so now tell me a little bit more. You're also a co-chair of the Working Group on Conflict Prevention and Peacekeeping of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, a global platform based in DC. What is that, and what are you doing with them?
That's a platform where women of color advancing peace and security could come together and advocate for whatever they believe in. For example, there is Human Rights Working Group who coordinate with the other groups. It's not only when the coordination is done, even though it is a platform for women of color, we coordinate with everybody. So similarly, there is a working group on peacemaking or peace building, and I'm co-chairing that one. So through that one, we are making sure that we make sure that the voice of women of color is heard in peace building, peacemaking, and conflict resolution. We also provide recommendations to administration, the upcoming administration, on what are the major peace building, or what are the major conflict issues that needs to be addressed by the government. And we also engage with the UN. We also engage with different organizations working on peace building issues. We bring voices from the field, like, for example, we bring women from the field through Zoom. Now it's not possible to bring them in person, but through Zoom, they are given a chance to talk about their work that is happening. We also support in policies. So it's kind of, we just started, this working group recently started, and I'm super happy to be part of this working group with two other wonderful ladies. And we are very much looking forward for this working groups.
Well, you're doing a lot of great things. Now, you're also part of the Rotary Action Group for Peace Subcommittee on Nuclear Weapons Education. So you're spanning from stopping tribes from fighting to stopping us from blowing up our world. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is, I didn't know about the nuclear. I mean, I wouldn't say ignorant. I did know about it, but I was not aware about the effect that could happen to happened globally because of the nuclear weapon. I thought, like, if it happens in one country, it is restrained to that one country. But then I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Ira Helfand in his speech, in his keynote speech in California, one of the conferences. And I think that was kind of a moment where I realized, yeah, this is something we all need to advocate. And then a good friend of mine, Anne Fringe, she has been working on nuclear weapon for so long, and I started talking to her, and I started asking her, like, what could I do? Like, what can I contribute? And then we started slowly kind of, meeting and, like discussing about it. That's how I joined this subcommittee on nuclear eradication, where or educating people, or educating Rotarians on the horrific impact of nuclear weapon. At the moment, there are 9 countries around the world who have like nuclear weapon. But the thing is that if any one of these countries uses nuclear weapon, it's going to affect everybody in the world. It's something similar to, it's much more, dangerous than COVID. We thought like before, we thought like, the COVID or something, it will not affect, like, oh, it's in China, it won't affect us. But now we all are inside our home, doing nothing. Of course, we are doing Zoom and, like we are continuing, but not in person. So it affected the economy and all the aspects of human life. So something similar to that one, or much dangerous than that one, the nuclear weapon, if we don't advocate and if we don't make sure that the governments are eradicating this nuclear weapon, it's going to affect everybody. And the other thing is that the governments are spending so much money. For example, India and Pakistan, because they have been in rivalry for so long, when India buys one weapon, nuclear weapon, the Pakistan will also spend too much money on buying nuclear weapon when people are starving, when people don't have, health facilities, when people don't have shelter, people are living in, slums. That's a time when the government is spending so much money on nuclear weapon, which I believe will not be used, which I pray that will not be used by this government.
What you mentioned about the money and the economy, I think maybe the key thing tying all these things together. You talked about shaming these tribes, was kind of shaming us that we have to have you come back to the United States to help us stop our conflicts. But the economic basis of all that, here Sudan is a country rich in natural resources and in oil, and yet they're so impoverished that the only way kids can get a meal is to join the military, and yet there seems to be plenty of money for military. And we seem to find that, as you mentioned, in India. And then back in the United States, the same thing. Our country, as Eisenhower warned, is being drained from ever having any productive economy because we're pouring it all into military. And right now, there's a bill before Congress that's, I think Ann mentioned, she could put it in the chat maybe, that they want to do this total new program for promoting nuclear and subsidizing nuclear, and even in the nuclear energy area where it wouldn't even compete with solar and all, but weren't getting the government subsidies. So is there sort of an economic underpinning that ties all these issues that you're working on together?
Completely agree with you on that. The government, even if, whether it be in South Sudan, I still have like a lot of questions about South Sudan, because South Sudan is a country which is struggling to feed its people, struggling to pay, like most of the time it's also struggling to pay its soldiers. But it's not struggling in getting arms in that country. There is no shortage of arms in the country. So where are these arms coming up? Where are they getting the money for? So the governments are spending a lot of money on the security and the defense. For example, the US is, from 2017 to 2045, I guess, if I'm not wrong, to update the nuclear weapons, the current nuclear weapons, because it needs to be updated to or modernized to the new ones. It will cost more than trillions of dollars. So when the country is struggling to provide enough good health system to the people, why do we need, I'm not only talking about US, I'm also talking about India, I'm talking about Pakistan, I'm talking about like all the other countries who have these nuclear weapons and other guns. Why do this country need this much of weapons when they're not able to satisfy the needs of or satisfy the needs of their own people.
It is so sad because really what we all basically want is security, and all of us working in the anti-nuclear movement want to have our world secure from nuclear weapons, and they're just kind of mixed up about how we get security, because we keep struggling for getting security from military power. It never gets us any, so we build more, and then still doesn't get us, so we build even more. We're still not secure, so we build even more. It's what they call, there's a cartoon of Uncle Sam on the couch, and he says, I have more nuclear weapons than anyone in the world. I have more defense, and I'm still feeling insecure. What's wrong, doctor? And the doctor says, well, you see, it's a military-industrial complex.
I also think that there is a lot of people making money out of it. It's called conflict financing. So I also always think that there's a lot of people. It's a business. People are making money out of it. And I think to your comment about people are. It's all because of insecurity. But I don't think nuclear weapon or guns will make us secure. The only way we can feel secured is building this trust between each other. If we don't have that trust between each other, whatever we have in this world, it's not going to give us security. I always tell this to myself, as long as we start using you and I, it is not going to work. When we start using the word we, that's a time, there will be safety and security of everybody. And I really like the idea of Gary Davis' idea of global citizenship. And I think to him, it means renouncing his citizenship. But for me, it is about humanity, considering everybody as a human being and, treating everybody equally. And I think that's not that difficult. When you start doing that one, I think you slowly, you don't feel feared or you don't feel threatened by other people. When you start threatened, when you have that fear, when you start thinking about you and I, that's the time we have fear and we feel threatened by the other person. But when we start thinking about we, there is no more threat. There is no more fear. We all are together.
Wow, I love that. We is the acronym for whole earth. And when the whole earth is together and we all see ourselves as we, wow, we can do it all. So with that, let me open it up to we. Do we have any questions here from others in the audience?
Yes, we do. And thank you, Asha. You are powerful. You are amazing. You are an incredible inspiration, because just listening to you talk and what you've gone through and what you've done is so inspiring. And I hope a lot of people are going to be inspired by this talk. So yes, we do have questions. Our first question would be from Mike Caruso. If you could go ahead, please.
Thank you, Melanie. And thank you, Asha, for sharing your story. It's very, very inspiring. Question I have, you recently mentioned you completed your Peace and Conflict Resolution Program at UNC Duke, Peace and Conflict Resolution. Could you tell us a little more? I think there's at least 7 or 8 Rotarians on this call. And if you could give us a little information about how that process was and how that may have affected you going forward.
Thank you so much for this question. Actually, I initially, when I was working for the UN mission, I didn't have zero knowledge about, this particular peace fellowship, but I did know about the wonderful work Rotary has been doing all around the world, especially in India. It was I came to know about Rotary Peace Fellowship through 2 of my mentors. I call them my mentors. They're my friends, but they're my mentors. They have been supporting me a lot, Anne and Michael, who have been supporting me a lot. So I came to know about the Rotary Peace Fellowship, and I applied for the Rotary Peace Fellowship. And there are 5 universities around the world. We call it as Rotary Peace Centers, which is completely funded by the International Rotary and by the Rotarians. Of course, it's funded by the Rotarians around the world. It helps build the capacity of young leaders to take responsibility or to continue their work in peace building and conflict resolution and human rights. I have a friend who is who's from the medical field, and she's a Rotary Peace Fellow. she also graduated. Now she is supporting the CDC and in the COVID, the fight against COVID. So it's kind of building the capacity of leaders or the young leaders to take up their role. And yeah, so it's one of the best fellowship anybody who would like to work on this field can get.
Wonderful. Wow. And also, I would like to go to a couple little comments in the chat. Jean says, yes, thank you, Asha. Such a powerful life's journey for peace and reconciliation. And then we have another one from Joseph. He says, thanks, Asha. Your courage is very inspiring. So now we have another question from John Haggerty. John, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thanks, Asha, for another marvelous example. Before I start, I must say that I hope you'll still respect me. I was taken off a plane in Minneapolis, St. Paul, by the FBI. I was in America, and when they x-rayed my luggage, a paper bag, believe it or not, and some sort of nail clippers or something, they thought it was a gun. But much more important, when people talk about peace or non-violence, often I find it hard to get people to cooperate because they think you're a dreamer, crazy, unrealistic, it's been tried before. And fortunately, I just consider it common sense. And I ran schools as a principal for 17 years on most of it, on care, courtesy, common sense. But can you give us any clues on how to get that small group of people who'll cooperate with you on common sense things without them bringing up the idea, dreamer, crazy, etc.? And thanks again for your wonderful work.
Thank you so much, John, for this question. I think, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also feel the same when you talk about nonviolence. People laugh at you. Like, that's a thing. When I went to South Sudan for the first time, people were like, the only way to resolve a problem is fighting with each other. And we don't believe in this nonviolence. But there, after, a couple of months, they started appreciating that nonviolence works better than violence. If you take into like Indian independence, like, for 100 years, more than 100 years, we are ruled by British. And Mahatma Gandhi, who is considered as a global leader of nonviolence, fought only with nonviolence. He never used violence. So that is another example. And of course, Martin Luther King, in the civil resistance movement in US, used only nonviolence. He is a big advocate of nonviolence. So I definitely get the point, like when people say that nonviolence doesn't work. And I think the first thing about nonviolence is kind of, building the trust among people. That is, I think, for whether it be nonviolence or like, one of the major tactics is building that trust and connection between people is so important. And then making sure that, you are there to support people. You're not going to impose anything on the people. I'm just giving you an example from the Minneapolis or the South Sudan. It's like you are respecting the primacy of local actors. But you are using this, nonviolent tactics like protective presence. You are there without a gun. You yourself are there. You have that much confidence that like this particular nonviolent tactics works much better than with a person with arm. I can give you an example. Like when I was working for the UN mission and also for the NGO, I felt much more safer when I was working for Nonviolent Peace Force to work around the market and the city in South Sudan than going in a car with a group of people having guns. And I think that itself, I think that's a feeling that I had that, like the nonviolence is much powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And people just have to learn that, and that's what you're doing. That's perfect. So we do have a quick two other questions. Michael had to leave, but he wanted to know what you're up to next.
Thank you, Michael. The next is, of course, I did my policy studies. I definitely want to support leaders and organizations in coming up with policies to ensure that the civilians are protected and people are protected against conflict and violence. People who are suffering because of conflict and violence are supported and they are protected. So definitely I will be working on a policy level to support the organizations and decision makers.
Wonderful. And then the very, very last one, if we can squeeze it in, Sala would like to follow up on Mike Caruso's question. What specific things did you learn from your 2-year program at Duke?
Specific things that I learned is, of course, the policy is one thing. And the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is so unique and different from the other fellowships, is because you get a lot of opportunity to interact with a lot of people working on peace building, conflict resolution, human rights, and humanitarian issue. That you learn, people who are experienced, that is much more than academic education. So I would say that was an important thing. And then you are studying with 10 scholars who have so much experience in their field, because the Rotary Peace Fellowship is given to people who have more than 5 years, like normally it is 5 to 10 years. So it's a mid-career. So they all have like so much experience. So you learn from all the 9 other peace fellows, like, their perspectives, the tactics that they used in their country. So I would say, in addition to the academic, we also learn from each other.
Wonderful. Wow, this has been phenomenal. And thank you so much. My goodness, I'm going to now turn it back to Arthur for the rest of the program, which is very short. Arthur, take it away.
First of all, I do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Numerous times during your story, I got choked up, and I'm just so moved by you and your experience, and really, really appreciate you. And I want everyone to know that in a day, Melanie will edit the video a little bit, and it'll be online here at People Powered Planet. You can just go to People Powered Planet. That shortcuts you to theworldismycountry.com/club, a little shortcut to that. And there, not only will you be able to hear Asha, but you can go back and she mentioned Ira Helfand and his powerful speech to the Rotary Peace Conference that we both went to, and that had such an impact on all of us. And we're so grateful to Barbara and Rudy and the people who put that on. But also, so you can hear Ira on our podcast, go back and listen to him. But more important, do listen to David Hartsoe. And David Hartsoe is very much in my mind right now because of him being in the hospital. And I understand that you had a Zoom conference on Thanksgiving with David, the co-founders of the Nonviolent Peace Force, David Hartsoe and Mel Duncan. Can you tell us a little bit before we close about that and how we can all add our good thoughts and prayers for David's recovery?
Yeah, I mean, it was after the Thanksgiving. It was for, I think it was like a service, a church service thing, and David was also there. It was also kind of, Thanksgiving, I mean, gratitude, telling the gratitude and all. So Mel was the one who organizes, and David was there. It was so inspiring to see him, even though like he was going through hard times. He has that positive energy, and he's still inspiring a lot of people, and especially people like me, that, life is like this, but you still continue doing what you're supposed to do. So that's very inspiring.
Well, let's all send positive, good energy for his healing and for him to come through this crisis. It is life-threatening, but like I say, he's been in a lot of life-threatening situations. So go, David. You are touching so many lives and so important. Well, I just want to invite all of you to come back each week for the People Powered Planet podcast. To go click down in the bottom of the box to actually sign up as a club member. You have 2 choices there. You can, get a free temporary look at it, or you can sign up. But we would love to have your support as an ongoing member. It's really very low cost, only 2 months free and then $10 a month. And you can join us in helping get the funds that we can use to help get the film out. We're also having a very important meeting this Friday on Zoom, if any of you are interested, about helping to enroll more sponsors for our upcoming public broadcast of The World Is My Country. As you mentioned, Asha, that film helped inspire you. And I think you were telling me that, when you saw it, you said, well, gee, I've always felt that way as a world citizen, but no one's ever put it together. No one's ever made it something you could join and do. And Gary kind of gels that world citizen idea into something concrete. And so we do. We're so excited that we will have it out on public broadcasting. We're working on getting it out on the World Channel that will go all across the U.S., in Minneapolis and everywhere else. And but we do need more sponsors up front. And we're having a meeting to kind of brainstorm on who might want to have their business, their organization, their association, other mentioned, where it says this program brought to you by, and it could be saying, the Rotarian Action Group for Peace, or whatever the group is. We do have people from all over the world joining us, and we hope you'll join us again each week. Thank you so much, Asha. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, each of us, for joining us. I appreciate your being on the People Powered Planet podcast.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.